this video, I'm going to show you how to UV unwrap this vase and add an animated texture on top of it. This process can work for any cylindrical objects like a bottle or a can. So let's get into it. Alright, so we're inside Cinema 4D where we have our vase or vase, depending on how you say it. By the way, this is just a model that I downloaded from the asset library here, so you can do the same if you want to follow along. And because this project was inspired by ancient Chinese ceramics, the basic configuration, it's having a top and bottom band and also a middle larger area where the main artwork is going to go. So first, let's make sure our polygon selection tool is selected and also select our object as well, and go to loop selection. And now we're going to pick out where we want that top band goes. So highlight your loop and then press shift on the keyboard to add more selections. Oops. And yeah, maybe one more band here. That looks good. And what we want to do now is we want to add a new material to it. So go to create material, materials, and then I'm going to drag this onto here, and I'm going to change its color as a placeholder for now, just so we see clearly on how it looks. And by doing this, also we've created a new polygon selection tag. So let me demonstrate to you what this does if you don't know. So if we click on our polygon selection tag and press select, it's going to select our area here where this material goes onto. And now we're going to do the same for the middle band and the bottom band. I'm just going to skip ahead. Okay, so now we've got our middle as well as our bottom band and its associated polygon selection tag. So let me just quickly show you. And these tags will become quite important as we are going to do our UV unwrapping right now. So let's go to our UV edit tab. Make sure our object is selected. And it looks like this right now because my default projection is set to frontal. So it's going to show the front of the object. Now, if you're new to the idea of UV unwrapping, the simplest way I can explain it to you is, imagine if you got this vase as a birthday present and it's wrapped in a birthday present wrapper, and you wanted to, for some reason, draw on the paper. So you unwrap the wrapping paper and lay it flat on a table. So now it's easier for you to draw on it, or in our case, to put a texture on top of it. And just to jump ahead to what we want, I'm going to take you to my After Effects file where we have our UV map as a 2D image here. Here is our top band, middle band, and bottom band. And this is where I overlaid our After Effects composition here. And if I drag the timeline, you can see that it's animated. And now if we import this back into Cinema 4D and put it into our object, it's going to be perfectly placed to where we want it to be. Alright, so now let's get back into Cinema 4D. With a cylindrical object like this, we want to first try to use the cylinder projection tool under UV Manager. So I'm going to click this and see what happens. And as you can see, it's unwrapped the cylinder into a flat plane on our UV map. And in order to check if there's any distortion, we want to create a checkerboard material. So let's go to our material manager, create classic materials, new standard material. I'm just going to rename this checkers and double clicking it under texture, surfaces. I'm going to choose checkerboard. And I'm going to apply it to our vase here. And it's a little bit too big, so going back here, double click the texture, and I'm going to make this 2020. So something like this works a lot better. And as you can see, it's okay, but our middle band here, it's a bit distorted. So let's go back into our UV edit tab and see what we could do about it. So now this is where our polygon selection tags that we've created earlier comes into handy. I'm going to select the middle band, go to select, and in our UV map here, make sure our move tool is selected, or E on the keyboard. And I'm just going to move this out of the way here. And I'm going to do the same with our top band and middle band. Okay, and with everything else, I'm going to just move it out of the way. And bring back our important bands into the main area. And pressing UF on our keyboard, we can select the surface as a whole. And I'm going to first try to use automatic UV and packed. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to go to relax UV, press apply. And that works a lot better now. You can see that these are now perfect squares as opposed to rectangles earlier. And I'm going to now press UV rectangularize and drag it back into the middle. And now we're going to do the same process for our top band and also our bottom band, because I noticed that they're also a little bit stretched. So go to relax UV, press apply, and go to UV rectangularize. By the way, I find that it works a lot better if we turn on equidistance distribution, press OK. And if we scale this up a bit, you see that the squares are now a lot more squarer. And let's try to do the same on our bottom band. UV relax, rectangularize. Okay, that works. And you may have noticed we also have distortion with the bottom area as well as our top area here. But since I know we're not going to apply textures to these areas, it's just going to have a ceramic material. And also at the bottom here, I'm not planning to show it, then I can skip correcting the distortion of those areas. So with UV unwrapping, it's also a bit strategic in knowing ahead of time what you're going to show and what you're not going to show in order to pick on what to work on. Otherwise, we could spend a lot of time making this perfect, but if nobody's going to see it, then it doesn't really matter at the end. And our next problem is that our UV maps are all different sizes right now. So our middle band is much larger than the rest of the vase. And to solve that, make sure we don't have any surfaces selected here, and go to UV packing, geometric, and press apply. And now it's going to fit all of these UV surfaces onto our UV map here. And they're all more or less equal size. But we now have another issue where we're not fully utilizing the space given here. And this is going to affect our resolution size. So what we can do is remove some of the surfaces here that we're not going to see. So in particular, the inside of the vase, we're not going to see. So I'm going to select the inside of our vase, which I know is this surface here. And if we go to our model space, you can see that the inside is now highlighted. And using the move tool, we can move this off our UV map. And now if we select the rest of our UV islands, we can go to UV packing again and press apply. And now our UV islands are now packed in a more economical way. And because we're only texturing the top, middle, and bottom band, we're also going to remove the other surfaces just to make things clearer for us. So press UF, E on the keyboard. I'm going to move this away. And like so. And I'm just going to move the top band to the top and the bottom band to the bottom here. And now we want to export this as a texture map. And in order to do that, we need our material and layers tab. And if you don't have that, and I don't think Cinema 4D has this on by default for some reason, you can go to Window and find it here and also here. So we want to create a new material. Go to Create, Classic Materials, New Standard Material, and under Texture, go to Create New Texture. And I have it by default as 5000 by 5000. Press OK. And now we have our background here, and we can go to Layer and go to Create UV Mesh Layer. And now you see we have a new layer, and it's basically an outline of these UV maps. If we right click it, go to Texture, Save Texture As, save as a TIFF format, and we can save it as a UV map. You can see some of the UV maps I saved earlier. I'm just going to save it as UV map 4. So going back to the After Effects file that I did for this project, this is what it should look like when I imported my TIFF file that we just created with our UV island here. And this is where I overlaid my compositions over it. And in order to find out what dimensions these compositions needed to be, I just created different shape layers to overlay on top of it, make sure that it's perfectly aligned with our UV islands. And in order to find out the size, I just go to Content, Rectangle, Rectangle Path, and copy the size and use that as my composition size. And then I populate these compositions with my artwork, and finally, making sure all the bottom layers are turned off, I export this as an alpha enabled PNG sequence, and when it's exported, it should look something like this. So now back in Cinema 4D, we're finally ready to apply our animated texture. So firstly, I'm going to delete our checkerboard as well as our placeholder materials. And I'm going to apply first a ceramic material from the asset library. For this project, I used the ceramic smooth. Double click it to make it appear on our material manager and drag it to our vase here. And you can see it's being applied. And I'm going to go to Create Materials, Material, double click it, press C to bring up our texture node. And I'm going to go to Path and bring in the first image of our PNG sequence. Press yes, okay. And then going to animation, I'm going to choose either simple or loop, depending on what you're looking for. And for the end frame, I'm going to choose 288 because that's the amount of images I have on my PNG sequence, and change my frame rate to 24, which was the setting in my After Effects file. And then I'm going to make sure I uncheck Wrap U and V. And then going back to our node editor, press C to bring up the color splitter because it's an alpha element. And I'm going to input this here and output it to our opacity. And then for our RS material, we can control the color of the output by changing our diffuse color. So maybe a dark blue like this. And then if we now drag our new material onto our vase here, then it should map perfectly onto our vase where we had our UVs. And if we go to the animation section and drag our timeline, you see that the animation is working perfectly. I'm just going to rotate this to give you a show. So I hope that was useful. I know especially the UV mapping part, the UV unwrapping was a little bit complicated, especially if you're a newcomer to UV unwrapping, but hopefully it was useful and clear and that you learned a lot from it. So happy creating and hope you have a good day.